My friends over at Abbey Rents have agreed to let me use their Google Analytics today. So if you're near San Francisco and need an outdoor tent or tables and chairs for your upcoming party, give them a call. They're awesome. Okay, let's take a look at these menus on the side, starting with the audience menu. This will give us an overview of several things. The first one is sessions. And if you hover over each of these, you'll get Google's definition. Here you can see that a session is the period of time a user is actively engaged with your website or app, whatever. And by the way, Google doesn't tell you this, but a session is normally a 30-minute period, meaning that you could leave and come back or click an ad to visit a handful of times during a session, and it will only count as a single session. Remember this because we're going to talk about it later. Here we have users that have had at least one session within the selected date range. This includes both new and returning users. Page views is the total number of pages viewed. Repeated views of a single page are counted. Pages/sessions is the average number of pages viewed during a session. And this is the average length of a session. Bounce rate is the percentage of single page visits. In other words, the person left your site without interacting with the page. In last week's newsletter, I addressed bounce rates. Studies show that the average bounce rate is somewhere between 40 and 60%, and that traffic from mobile sources tends to be around 10% higher than desktop. Sorry, I don't remember the source off the top of my head. I think it might have been Mashable. Either way, studies show that it's okay for me to say studies show in front of whatever I want to say, and it makes it true. Okay, this last one is percentage of new sessions. But by their own definition, Google states that this is just an estimate of first-time visitors. Now, if you want to look at this data for a specific time period, you can pick your date range here. There's even a feature to compare date range to another, which we'll do shortly. The next tab I want to look at is the Acquisition tab. This will give us a high-level look at where our traffic is coming from. You've got organic traffic. These are visitors who found their way to the website from a Google search. These users clicked on the free link on Google, not a paid ad. Next, you have referral traffic. That means that they clicked a link from somewhere other than Google. This could be a link in a news article or on another website, but it's most often a click on a banner ad somewhere. Direct traffic comes from visitors who knew the website's URL and typed it in the address bar on their browsers and went directly to the site. Paid search is just what it sounds like. You can see this business has a Google AdWords account that is responsible for a solid percentage of their traffic. And social comes from sites like Twitter and Facebook. When we click on each of these, we get a deeper look into the results. When I click on organic, I get a peek at some of the keywords users searched in order to find them. Now, unfortunately, Google stopped providing all of this data in 2013, so this is just a representative sampling of the keywords. Now let's look at this because it's really kind of important to understand, and I've seen more than one advertiser who was confused after Google made this change. Take this keyword, for example. Party Rentals San Francisco is their perfect keyword. This is exactly what the business does. Now, it's highly unlikely that only 7 users found their way to the site having Googled this keyword phrase. So why is it only showing 7? Well, there were 5,819 sessions in April, and Google isn't showing us 5,135 of those keywords. That means they're showing us like 10% of the keywords and hiding 90%. It's probably a safe bet that this 7 sessions right here is the 10%, and that there are as many as 10 times that who actually found their way to the site after using that keyword. In other words, you can take all of these numbers and multiply them by 10 to get a more accurate look at what keywords are driving how much traffic. All right, we're going to come back to acquisition in a minute, but first let's look at the behavior tab. So acquisition is how did they get there, and behavior is what are they doing once they get there. You can see all the different pages that people are visiting. It even shows you the exact URLs so you can see which pages are the most popular. Your homepage is almost always going to be your number one page. It looks like the second most popular page on this site is something called Cat Pics. Hang on. Cat Pics? Let's look at that. I didn't know he had a Cat Pics page on this site. What? Hang on a second. Okay, I guess that makes sense. Cat is category. Whew, I feel better. I was worried there for a second. All right, that's enough of that. Let's get to the good stuff. We're going to look at Google Analytics to see if this advertiser's display campaign had a positive impact. A few things you should know. We ran a 3-week test starting on April 6th and running through April 30th. Would I have liked a larger data set to compare? Yes. 3 weeks is not a lot of time for a campaign to be live before getting judged. So this is a lot like the first weigh-in on your new diet. Hopefully you'll see some indicators that it's on the right track, but let's keep in mind that a test comparing, say, 90 days of results with either the previous 90 days or even better, the same 90 days the previous year would be a much better set of data to judge. For the purposes of our test, I did ask the business owner not to make any other advertising changes during this time period. That means that his Google AdWords budget was exactly the same as the month before, and that he didn't hit the market with any traditional media like newspaper, TV, or radio in April. Now, during our test, we served about 250,000 impressions. At $10 CPM, that would run about $2,500, which we justified based on his PPC spend, which is about that much. The campaign used a blend of site, search, and contextual keyword targeting. It was geo-targeted to his DMA of San Francisco. It got 821 clicks, and what I would admittedly call better than average CTR. But since we're not going to really focus on CTR for this discussion, that number is practically irrelevant. We ran the 3 traditional desktop display ads and 2 mobile ads. Now, for the record, the advertiser did not see his own ad until we dialed up the budget on site retargeting near the end of the month, which we were only able to do because he does have a decent amount of site traffic, by the way. Let's dive into the campaign by looking at it in the usual way that most advertisers would. So we know that this campaign ran from April 6th to April 30th, so I'm going to set that as my custom date range. Okay, if I'm like most business owners who use Google Analytics, I'm going to go straight to acquisition, then overview, then referral to see the direct traffic I got from my targeted display ads. As you can see, they have several different referral sources. These are probably some kind of bot or spam. So we're going to use this filter to only look at referrals that came from the Simplify ad servers. There we go. Oh, hang on. Let's address this. See these 65 clicks from adspreview.simplify? It has a 100% bounce rate because those are actually test clicks. See, when we upload the ads, we click them, or we have our computers click them, or the exchanges click them to make sure everything is working across all of our ad servers. So I'm going to further filter the results by adding ads dot in front of simplify. That's better. That's more accurate. Okay, now we can see exactly how many sessions resulted from the targeted display ads. You can see that we got 647 sessions. These were the small percentage of folks who actually clicked on the ads. You know, the 8% of people who are responsible for 85% of display ad clicks. Now that stat I've quoted enough times that I do remember where it comes from. It's a ComScore stat. But wait a minute. When I showed you how many impressions we served earlier, maybe you noticed that the Simplify reporting stated that we got 821 clicks. Well, that's a lot more than 647. See? This report shows 821 clicks. So why don't those numbers match? This is a question we get a lot of. Well, according to James Poland on my ad ops team, by the way, James has been a platform strategist since 2011, has worked with hundreds, maybe even thousands of campaigns, and was a Google AdWords specialist before that. Again, I'm not afraid to leverage the brains of people who are smarter than me. I mean, frankly, these webinars would probably only be about 10 minutes long if I didn't. Sorry. According to James, there are 2 reasons these numbers don't match. 1, Google counts individual visits by users in a single browsing session. A browsing session is a 30-minute period defined by Google when a user is online. Basically, it means that the user could visit the site 5, 10, 15 times in 30 minutes and only be counted as a single visitor. In addition, Google tends to give themselves credit for visits from users who may have performed a Google search after clicking on one of our display ads. In other words, if they click on our ad and come to the site, but then later Google the business by name and come to the site again, Google only counts this as a single visit and doesn't give credit to the referring ad server. This is why the Google sessions will always be less than the Simplify recorded click number. Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, let's assume we have an advertiser who doesn't buy our explanation and will only give us credit for that Google Analytics number of 647. Okay, I'll play along. Here are 647 sessions from visitors who clicked on the ads. If this is all we get credit for, we're looking at $2,500 divided by 647, which ends up being about $3.86 a click. If our advertiser is able to close even 2% of those, that's 13 customers. And knowing his average customer value, it's safe to say that 13 customers are worth more than twice what the display campaign cost. If we stopped right there, this metric alone should have resulted in a positive ROI and thus justifies the investment. If he still pushes back and wants to run the numbers only giving us credit for new users to the site, that's these 256 users, well, I'm still going to say, if you can't close 4 deals out of 250 prospects who were so interested in your business that they clicked an ad and then spent over 2 minutes on your site, I don't know what else to say. There's only so much we can do. Honestly, this all makes sense, and frankly, even at $3.86 a click, that's not a terrible cost per click. I've heard of clicks costing much more than that. But your advertiser might put up a fuss if their Google AdWords pay-per-click ads run less. And in fact, I happen to know that this advertiser's PPC costs are running about $2 per click. So it's important that we don't stop here. Otherwise, it appears that even though display works, it costs twice as much as PPC. So we need to dive deep and prove even more value. Let's go back and use the calendar function to compare the weeks in April when we ran the targeted display campaign to the same dates in March before the campaign went live. So that would be the Audience tab, then Overview, and this campaign ran April 6th through the 30th, and I want to compare that to a custom date range of March 6th through March 30th. Okay, now we can start to make some comparisons. So this blue line represents when the display campaign was live, and the orange line is the month before. Now let's take a look at these metrics again. This is the big story that we really need to highlight. All things being equal during the 2 3-week periods, except that we added a display campaign and sessions are up 32%, that's nearly 2,000 more sessions than the previous month. That's a lot more than just the 647 sessions we discovered from the referral traffic, right? If the advertiser is willing to concede that our display campaign had something to do with this, what's that make the cost per click? 2,500 divided by 2,000 sessions is $1.25 a click. But maybe asking for full credit on all of those is a lot to ask. So let's keep looking. Users are up 22%. That's nearly 1,000 more people who visited the site. 2,500 divided by 1,000 new users, that's $2.50 per new user. That's more like the PPC number. I'm impressed. You're not? Your advertiser wants more? Okay, then let's look at the quality of the traffic. During the time our display campaign ran, users looked at 31% more pages on the site. Can you explain that with any logic other than the users who are coming to the site this month are more interested in your products and services? And I think this 9% increase in session duration and this nearly 9% decrease in bounce rate also support that theory that this month's prospects are more relevant. Now, to be fair, we do have less pages, sessions, but at 1%, that's negligible. Percent of new sessions is also slightly down, but let me tell you why that's awesome. Do you remember my favorite stat from Simplify's initial sales training? 97% of first-time visitors will leave your site without taking action. Site retargeting's whole job is to bring those users back for a second look. This decrease in percentage of new visitors is actually proof that our site retargeting campaign is doing exactly what we said site retargeting would do. More repeat visitors. Especially for a site like this, it's a great thing. Do you think that brides decide to rent all the stuff for their wedding the first time they visit a website like this? Or could it be that they shop around? Maybe they come back to the site later with their fiance or their mother. I'm looking at these metrics and I'm thinking, this looks great. Clearly, the story here is that since adding display, traffic is up significantly and the visitors are more interested in the content. If this is all we had to go on, I think most of us would agree that the display campaign had a positive impact on the business. But let's look at one more thing that helps back up my anecdotal assumptions that display was responsible for these changes. We've already talked about the fact that most people don't click on ads. We know this to be true. Consider your own behavior online. Even when you see an ad that interests you, you won't click on it. Why? Well, based on what I've heard from a lot of you, most of us won't click on an ad because we don't want to lose our place in the article we're reading, or we don't trust that the ad isn't going to cause pop-ups or diminish our web surfing experience in some way. So if we are intrigued by the ad and we want to take action, that action is usually us opening another tab on our browser and then Googling the name of the business in the ad. Do you agree? Have you ever done that? I can't see you, but I know you're nodding, or at least have that one eyebrow raised and you're thinking, I guess I have done that. So if that's the way users act when they are influenced by a display ad, what would we look for in Google Analytics to measure that? Right, brand searches. People searching for the site using the business name. So we're going to go and see if there was any change to the keywords that drove traffic to the site during the time period that our display campaign ran. Click on Acquisition, then All Traffic, then Channels. I want more results than the top 10, so I'm going to change this number. As you can see, the majority of keywords that people used to find this business include the business's name. That's awesome. Why? Well, it means that this business has a great reputation. It has great brand recognition. It means that when people search for them by name, they're going to easily find them. They are number one for their name. It means their competitors aren't going to be sharing the Google search results page with them. So the question we have to answer is this: did our display ads increase brand searches? Well, let's use this filter to make sure we are only looking at searches that include the business's name. And the answer is yes. Brand searches are up 60%. 181 in April versus 113 in March. But hold on. Remember, that's just a percentage of folks who found them using their name. Google isn't revealing the other 90% of search keywords, so it's probably safe to say that's more like 1,800 versus 1,100, or nearly 700 more users who searched for the business by name. Mr. Advertiser, can we agree that our display campaign gets at least some of the credit for that? Doesn't it just make sense that more people are looking for your business by name because we showed your ad 250,000 times to relevant prospects this month? Unless there's something else you're doing that suddenly made your business name 60% more popular than you were the month before. I mean, I'm just saying. Is this perfect data? No. Must our advertisers take at least a small leap of faith to give us credit for the increase of traffic that we claim was due to our campaign but did not click? Yes. But it's advertising. If they're not willing to have a little faith, then maybe display isn't for them. But then neither is television or radio or newspaper or any other traditional media that can't be tracked perfectly. Oh wait, that's all media. But hopefully you're dealing with business owners who do have some faith. If not in the specifics of the advertising, then in you. As their consultants, they put a lot of faith in how you perceive how the campaign is doing. So hopefully, at the very least, I've convinced you that a great way to measure the success of display is through an overall increase in web traffic, more brand searches, and higher quality of traffic shown through more time on site, more pages visited, and a lower bounce rate. Now, before we wrap up, let's look at one last thing. Looking at this page right here, it looks like bounce rate is up for these terms. It's still better than average, but admittedly up from last month. And page sessions and time on site decreased a bit. So here's what I want you to understand. No metric is black or white. You have to learn to interpret the data. Let me use an analogy here. If I told you that last month I gained 5 pounds, you would probably assume that I had gotten a little fatter, right? Actually, let's use the word chubbier instead. I like that better. But what if I told you that even though I gained 5 pounds, I also lost 2 inches around my waist? Now, what could you assume? That maybe I've been working out and that I'm building muscle? That additional information paints a very different picture, doesn't it? So what could less time on site from brand searches mean? Well, when you consider the kind of traffic that searches for a business by name, it starts to make sense. When we are looking for a business by name, especially one like this, we're looking for either an address, so we can visit their showroom, or a phone number, so we can call them for a quote. We don't need to spend more than a few minutes on the site for that, so maybe it's not a big deal that these metrics are a little lower for brand searches. You see this a lot when there's a lot of mobile traffic too. Mobile bounce rates are generally higher, and again, when we search on a mobile device, we're often just looking for a phone number, which would impact our time on site metrics. Analytics measure stuff, and numbers don't lie, but understanding how to interpret those numbers is key. It can make the difference between a client canceling and a client giving your campaign the chance it needs to prove itself in the only manner that really satisfies business owners: increased sales. And with that, I'm going to wrap up this month's webinar with one more terrible joke. Forgive me in advance, this is a bad one, but it's so relevant to this webinar, I have to tell it. Do you know why the internet marketer got off of his trampoline? He was worried about his bounce rate.